back to Resistance Chicks. We are your hosts, Leah and Michelle. It is the 7th of March. Means it's 4 days till Leah's birthday.
Aww.
Isn't that nice? You got like some sort of cute little feather thing going on there.
Yeah, it's natural. I have no natural feather. I didn't tell you guys I had.
You're like a bird.
I'm a bird at some time.
So we have an excellent show for you guys today. Jam-packed. We're going to spend a lot of time in the UK because there's stuff going on there. Nigel stepping down from not just Reform UK, but politics in general. It's kind of like a little heart-wrenching video we're going to play for you guys. We've got Lord Sumption, who's saying civil disobedience has begun.
And Lord Sumption is fairly recently resigned as a judge on the Supreme Court in the UK. And he describes himself as a liberal, a lefty, and he says that the lockdowns have gone too far.
Too far.
Too far. All right. And then we have... So Nigel Farage has created the Reform UK Party,
which was the Brexit Party. They had to transform it into something after Brexit was accomplished.
But actor Laurence Fox has created a Reclaim Party, and I have an interesting video to show for you. He is running for mayor of London. He is the anti-woke, anti-lockdown spokesperson at this moment.
Lord God on high. Please, so, if we have showed videos with him to you guys so many times using these panels, and he says something so, just mic drop. He's known for his mic drop moments.
I have to tell you,
boy.
I have to tell you, whenever I hear, and this is just my American, right, coming out of me. American. Even when they're spouting what I would call like idiotic wokeness, the British train their children to speak well. They train them in elocution.
Yes, that is very true.
And so I enjoy listening to the Brits give arguments because they know how to debate. So, all right. So should we start off? Let's start off. Heart-wrenching video, straight up. Go to Nigel.
Okay.
It's the beginning of a new season. So Nigel Farage, he says that he is going to step down from politics.
Let me see. I've got it up here. If you have it up here, I have it up here.
He announced on Saturday night that he would be stepping away from electoral politics and standing down as the leader of the Reform UK Party. But he vows to continue his fight against the increasing influence of communist China in Britain and the woke agenda sweeping the West. Just over 2 months after the United Kingdom's genuine departure from the European Union, Mr. Brexit has declared that his fight in electoral politics is over. Former Brexit Party MEP Richard Tice will be taking over as leader of Reform UK. Speaking with the Telegraph, Mr. Farage declared, "There is no going back. Brexit is done. That won't be reversed. I know I've come back once or twice when people thought I've gone, but this is it. It's done. It's over. Now the moment for me to say I've knocked on my last door. Wow. I'm going to step down as leader of the Reform UK. I have no executive position at all. I'm quite happy to have an honorary one, but party politics, campaigning, being involved in elections, that is now over for me because I've achieved the one thing I set out to do, to achieve the independence of the UK. I'm very excited about this. He says that Brexit was a grassroots rebellion, and it was my honor to lead those grassroots. Without a single person of real influence in this country advocating leaving the EU, we still got to the stage where a referendum was called, and that is a remarkable thing. Following the initial victory of the 2016 EU referendum, Mr. Farage stepped down as the leader of the UKIP party, saying he wants his life back.
Aww.
But he was thrust back into the electoral politics in 2019, however, with the formation of the Brexit Party, amid fears the Westminster establishment would overturn the results of a referendum. Nigel Farage single-handedly moved that needle.
He did.
The party achieved success in its first election, dominating the European Parliament elections. It was so fun to see them, though, taunting and laughing as a majority there with 29 seats, the most of any party in the EU.
You know what we don't have? Little British flags. We should. We've got some American ones.
We got a St. George flag. The humiliating defeat for the ruling Conservative Party ultimately foreshadowed the downfall of the anti-Brexit former Prime Minister. He single-handedly took out Theresa May.
Yes, I know. It was so great.
And now let's go to the YouTube address here.
Okay.
I'm going to put down a dog bed and see if she wants it.
She just laid there. We've got her. Now she's up.
I'll give her a dog bed. I'll give you a dog bed.
All right. Let me make us a little bit smaller. Let's go to Nigel here. They're heartbreaking.
Hard over the course of
I
the
don't
last
know. I
couple
don't
of
think he's
months,
done.
about nearly 30 years
Never
that I've been
done.
involved in active politics. It all started in October 1990 when somebody came into the bar in the city and said we joined the exchange rate mechanism. We pegged the pound against a basket of European currencies. John Major was the Chancellor that did it, and I was furious. I knew it wouldn't work, and sure enough, it led to record bankruptcies and house repossessions. Then we saw the Maastricht Treaty in 1993, a big Tory rebellion. But in the end, John Major used a confidence motion, and like good little boys, they all went through the lobby and voted for a treaty that they'd opposed in public. And that for me was the moment when I said, that's it.
That's it.
I've got to do something. Even if no one votes for me, I'm going to put myself up at the next general election. And I was fortunate to find some like-minded people, and UKIP was formed out of the Anti-Federalist League in September 1993. Within a few weeks, a Tory MP had died. There was a by-election in Eastleigh, and I found myself in a village hall in a place called Hursley between Winchester and Eastleigh, speaking to an audience, my first ever political speech. I have to admit, looking back on it, I was terrified. And really, I mean, the truth of it is, I never, ever stopped campaigning. The issue that got me to leave business was our membership of the European Union. I was convinced that if folk knew what it really stood for, if they understood the truth about the cost of it, the desire to take away our liberty, our independence, I knew that Middle England, that ordinary folk would say, we don't want this. And it was a very, very long battle. I guess the lucky thing that happened was that in 1999, we had European elections contested under proportional representation. So I found myself going to the European Parliament. Indeed, I thought the day I left last year, I'd actually been there in 4 different decades. So it was a long, hard fight. It was very difficult to get people to understand what sovereignty meant. Very difficult to get people to believe the extent to which we'd given away the ability to govern our country. And actually, it was sort of political heresy to even suggest that we should leave the European Union. We were treated as if we were the wild men from the hills. And then, of course, in 2004, the doors were opened unconditionally, first to 8 and then to 10 former communist countries. The government said an extra 13,000 people a year would come. Well, we all know that hundreds of thousands did. So this has been my life's work, getting us out of the European Union. And when in 2016, we won the referendum 52-48, I then took that moment to say, look, I think I've done everything I can possibly do. I know the Conservative government will not want to use me in any way at all, although I'd like to have been used. And I stood down as leader of UKIP and I said, I want my life back. But of course, it wasn't a completely clean break because I was still an MEP, I was still leading a group in the European Parliament. But I did start to develop media, extended social media, and that was the way that my life was going. Then, of course, when Mrs. May and her government absolutely betrayed all the promises that they'd made to the British people, and when I saw the Westminster establishment doing their utmost to overturn the result of the referendum, to make us vote again, that was when I knew something had to be done. And I formed the Brexit Party, and thank goodness I did. I think if I hadn't done that, which led to us winning the European elections despite only being launched for a few weeks with over 5 million votes, I think we wouldn't have left. But I'm pretty certain we wouldn't have left. So all of that was thoroughly worthwhile. And it was the first time ever in British politics when people have rallied to the colours as quickly as they did. I remember watching the website and seeing the £25 donations coming in, several every minute, ping, 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 it was astonishing. We then, of course, led the national opinion polls in the summer of 2019, and that pretty much guaranteed that Boris Johnson would become the leader of the Conservative Party with a Get Brexit Done message. And we've got Brexit. It's not perfect. Northern Ireland has been effectively cut off from the rest of the country. French boats and trawlers still operating up to 6 miles from the British coast. And difficulties, some import-export difficulties, although I'm sure they will be ironed out in time. But with the vaccine, we've now seen the benefit of being able to make our own decisions, not have it done for us by an unelected person in the European Commission. If we'd still been part of the EU, we would be in the same vaccine mess as the rest of Europe. And that, to me, is proof positive that Brexit was the right thing. Now, out of the Brexit Party came Reform UK. And that was a logical next step, because after all, the Brexit Party message, our banner said, change politics for good. And there is so much that needs changing. A bloated House of Cronies called the House of Lords, an electoral system whereby parties like UKIP can get 4 million votes and just 1 seat in Parliament, a postal voting system wide open to fraud, manipulation and abuse, and now aggressively being extended by both the Labour and Conservative parties. A tax system, now the most complex tax system of any country in the world, and something that does so little to encourage men and women that want to set up their own businesses, take a risk and get on with life. There is so much that does need to be reformed. We're a 21st century country being run by a 19th century set of institutions. So much does need to change. But on reflecting back over nearly 30 years, the issue that got me into politics, and if it hadn't been for this, I would never have even stood for local council, was our membership of the European Union and the fact that the entirety of our political class and then media class were all in favour of continued membership. That became my life's goal, and it took over the best part of 3 decades of my life. We've done it, we've achieved it, and for me, I feel my political career, in the sense of actively leading a political party, fighting election campaigns, such as ones that are coming up in May this year, I think now's the moment for me to say, look, I have done it. I guess in some ways, it's a repeat of what I said in 2016 when I said I want my life back. So before this election campaign starts for May, now is the minute, the right moment for me to say that I'm not going to go on as leader of Reform UK. I support everything it stands for, and whilst I won't have any executive control or responsibility, I'm quite happy to have an honorary position within the party, and that indeed is what I'll do. And I'll hand the leadership over to Richard Tice. And I hope, Richard, you know what you're taking on. I think he does, because he saw it at first hand as chairman of the Brexit Party. But leading a political party, leading one that challenges the establishment, it really is a 7-day-a-week job, and you find, huge sections of the media really vehemently opposed to you. I mean, they say things, they write things they just wouldn't do about people in the Labour and Conservative parties. So Richard has got a very big, tough challenge, but I know he's filled with bags of enthusiasm. I'll be there for help if he needs it. But this is not me retiring. Yes, I'm getting out of active party politics. I think I've done my bit, but I'm not retiring. Oh no, goodness gracious me, no. There are lots of other things that I want to fight for and campaign for. In particular, the increasing influence of the Chinese Communist Party over our whole way of life. And once again, the British establishment effectively have sold out to it. And I think that's a big education campaign that needs to happen. And I'm going to fight for that. The indoctrination of our children at school. It starts from the age of 7 or 8 and goes all the way through to university. We're not teaching young people critical thinking. They're being propagandized politically. And I think in many cases, encouraged to hate this country and everything it's ever stood for. And I want to fight that. And there are some environmental causes that I care strongly about, such as the health of our oceans, and let's get planting trees. Everybody talks about it, but nobody actually does it. So I'm going to battle and fight for all of those things that I believe in very, very passionately. I'm going to continue with a career in media, in social media. As many of you know, I've taken YouTube pretty seriously over the course of the last year. I'm not going away. I'm still going to fight and battle for change. We got Brexit. There's an awful lot more to do. But from me, after nearly 30 years, 1993, when I first put myself up for election in Eastleigh, for me, that's enough of active politics. And you know something? I've actually achieved what I set out to do. And I don't think there are many people in politics that can ever say that. And whilst much of it was a very long, hard road, not just for me, but for those around me, at the end of the day, it really was worth it. And none of it could have happened without thousands of you, tens of thousands of you, standing in local council elections, donating money, going out delivering leaflets, knocking on doors, manning street stalls. Tens of thousands of people have assisted me to do this. And out there in the country, millions of people, millions and millions, probably between 6 and 7 million people at some point voted for parties that I led. They had the confidence in me and the team around me to do that. And that is what completely changed British politics. That is what got us back our independence. I'd love to come and meet you all. It's not possible, but now really is the moment for me to say a massive, massive thank you to all of you who put your trust in me. And we did. It took a long time, but we did deliver. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. All right, I want to read some comments before we move on from that, because I know you guys have a lot of thoughts on what Nigel just said there. Gus says, keep it up, Nigel. There will be change in time. Carrie Ann says, we'll get to that actually in a minute. The fight has taken a lot out of poor Nigel. He will take a rest and he will keep fighting the fight, even if not in office. Nigel will be back if he is needed. If they start to fold to the EU again, he won't stand for that. Let me check. Let me see a couple other places, see if you guys have left some comments here on Periscope. The parties here and in the UK are impediments to positive change, the power through media. He knows when to cut losses and move on. The world changes one person at a time. Truly, that's really, really, really true. Let me check the YouTube comments here. Stuart the Brit says, funny how he is leaving just when Great Britain News is employing people from the right to the front of the new TV channel, ? Rome USA says, good for him. Stuart says, I missed Nigel telling the EU what for. Brit girl, take a second and pray for her. She was going to be on our show, but it's fine. She's having some tests done, but it's been a long day for her at the hospital.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm glad that she's here, at least in the chat.
Well, she comes from a different perspective. I know even before we had her on our first show, she is disillusioned with Nigel, Princely Nigel, Knightly Nigel, and I understand why.
Right.
With the affair, moral fiber of an alley cat, she said, promoting the vaccine. She's not exactly happy about that.
Right.
We have different words to say about that, not on YouTube.
Yeah, we can't say that on YouTube. We're still on YouTube.
Yeah. So... But it was so funny because I woke up today praying for Nigel Farage, knowing that there's so much good inside of him, and he was led by God to get you guys out of the EU.
It never would have happened without him. It just literally never would have happened.
And it would be worse. Like, Britain would be way worse off right now.
Right.
And God uses imperfect people a lot of times.
Right.
And so I was praying because... You guys really haven't left the EU because you have Boris Johnson, who has shown himself to be the real wolf in sheep's clothing.
Right.
Okay? There's a difference, in my opinion, between a Nigel Farage with a moral failing. I mean, David had an affair. and a wolf in sheep's clothing. Nigel Farage set out to do something that wasn't humanly possible.
Right.
And he put all his strength in that. And when you go to the top like that, it's very difficult to maintain your integrity, your morality. There's so much being thrown at you. There's so many spiritual attacks coming at your way. So I was praying that Nigel Farage would take the next leg, and he would, this is not impossible,
Right.
come to know Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior, because he touts the benefits of Christianity.
Right.
But the real benefits of Christianity come from people who knew Jesus Christ and had the Holy Spirit working through him. And he would come to know that if he had had the Holy Spirit working through him, it would have been easier.
Yeah.
It would have been even more successful. And he would have been able to stop even all this crazy pandemic stuff.
Exactly. I think that, honestly, in my humble opinion, Nigel's in the same boat as Donald Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
On with the vaccine.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And on what we believe Donald Trump could have and should have done, we'll say within the past few months before January 20th.
Yeah.
We think that there were a lot of things that Trump should have done and did not do in
Absolutely.
the same way that there were things
declassifications,
Nigel
things like
Nigel
that.
should have done and didn't do. I think they're in the exact same boat.
I do too. I think they're honestly, they call Boris Johnson the UK Donald Trump, but no, Farage is the UK Donald Trump.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But here's the deal. He's not leaving.
No.
I'm sorry I have this frog in my throat. You guys need to understand something. For us in our lives, what we do with the social media as we don't even go out live as often as we would like to because of time. Now, granted, we run a business and we run our homestead and we take care of our uncle and we've got some other people in our lives that we take care of. So we have a lot of irons in the fire. Mm-hmm. Okay. But to do the social media is so much. Now, running a political party, being active in politics is not the same thing. You may think to yourself, well, if he's going to leave politics, that means he's not going to comment on it. No, you don't understand. We're talking about having a job, like having a mission in politics where you have to be. Have you ever been the president of a club? Multiply that times like 1,000,000. You've got all these people calling you. You've got all these things that you have to actually get done. And somehow Nigel Farage managed to be a host of his own program on the LBC and get the UK out of the European Union over the past, however long, right? So for him to say, I just want to do one thing.
Yeah.
And I think we all know, and we're told this growing up, do not spread yourself too thin. Because if you can focus in on one thing, like honestly and truly, if we didn't have our homestead, if we didn't have our full-time, well, not our homestead, if we didn't have our full-time job, right? We could focus on this 1,000,000 times more.
Yeah.
But right now, that's not what God has for us. And that wasn't what God had for Nigel. But for right now, I'm actually happy for him.
Yeah. So Sue the Bird says, these years have shown us all the power is the media. Trump and Nigel need to do their stuff in the media and change it.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, so definitely, you are absolutely right about that. All right.
I think he's going to have more power.
Yeah.
Stepping away, and real leaders know when to hand over the reins to other people, right? Like, I'm needed over here. Y'all got this. And he said, I'm going to be like an honorary leader.
Right.
That meaning they're taking all of the pressure of the everyday paper shuffling and the getting before the camera to represent your party type deals off of Nigel, which is great. So I'm excited for him.
This I found incredibly...
Can we talk about this on the YouTube?
Cheeky. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The European Union is requesting coronavirus vaccine bailout from Biden.
What?
I know. The European Union will reportedly...
Hey, Holly.
Go ahead and take her outside. She might need to go.
She does not need to go.
We can distract.
She's just...
The European Union, it will reportedly call on the U.S. president to bail out their fledgling coronavirus vaccine drive. which has seen the bloc seize exports of vaccines to Australia. The European Commission plans to ask the United States to allow the export of millions of U.S.-made doses of the coronavirus vaccine developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University to the bloc, somewhat ironically giving its approval of Italy seizing EU-made AstraZeneca doses bound for Australia. The Financial Times reported that the Commission will raise the issue with American officials at an upcoming meeting to discuss transatlantic strategy in dealing with the pandemic. The European Commission told the paper, "We trust that we can work together with the U.S. to ensure that vaccine produced or bottled in the U.S. for the fulfillment of vaccine producers' contractual obligations with the EU will be fully honored. The EU will also be seeking assurances from the Biden regime." Administration that American rules will not prohibit the export of the raw materials needed to produce the vaccine in Europe. Following a call between between Biden and Ursula von der Leyen, Brussels said that the U.S. and the EU have strong interest in working together on vaccine supply chains. But I just find it incredibly interesting here. President Donald Trump had an executive order which mandated that the vaccines must meet domestic demand before being available for export. An official from the White House says the president's first priority is to make vaccines available for every American. The U.S. and EU have committed to deepening cooperation. So with all of the EU's perfection, you need the United States. And I'm just going to leave it like that. With all your perfection, you had a ton of countries there. Hello? The rollout of the vaccine, very interestingly, in Europe is pretty horrible. And I will not go into details on that one, but here's some Brexit boost. U.S. tariffs on Scottish whiskey, cheese, pork, machinery suspended. Brexit Britain has received a boost after negotiations. The suspension of U.S. tariffs on key exports such as Scotch whiskey, cashmere, cheese, pork, and machinery. With the European Union controlling its member states' international trade policy and Britain remaining subject to EU trade control up until the end of the 2020 transition period with the bloc, British exporters found themselves hit by punishing tariffs after being dragged into a dispute between Brussels and the DC related to Airbus and Boeing. While the opportunity for a full-fledged British-American trade deal President Donald Trump pushed from 2016 was lost as Britain's governing Tory party failed to complete Brexit until his term was all but over. A mini deal former Ambassador Woody Johnson and British Trade Secretary Liz Truss had been working for in the administration's dying days has now been completed. Britain lifted tariffs on Boeing parts as a goodwill gesture in January, and America will now suspend tariffs on Scotch, Stilton Chase, and other British products for 4 months in reciprocation.
So are you using a Scottish accent just to talk about Scotch, or did we go to Scotland? I missed it. I was out
U.S.
here.
tariffs on Scotch whiskey, cheese, pork, and machinery suspended.
But were you using the Scottish accent just for Scotch? I love you.
It was a deep guttural.
Was it more like you're thinking of
anytime you have so we did watch
Sean Connery or something?
We did watch The Fisherman Friends last night.
Barry, we watched The Fisherman Friends.
It was a fantastic movie. Any accent is British.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look into doing that accent. You've been asking me to do it. And I know it well because of Poldark. The redhead in Poldark has that accent. So I'm going to work on it, Barry, I promise.
Yeah, we learned a lot. It was a beautiful movie. I highly recommend it to everyone. It's fun.
Really fun.
Yeah. So there's that. There are some good.
Britt Baza had sent that to us.
Yeah.
I think, was it for Christmas or my birthday or something?
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, but we watched it and it was really, really, really fun.
Yeah, so I am not exactly sure. I don't know if Laurence Fox, his anti-woke, can he be played on YouTube?
Well, what does he say in the video? I didn't see the video. You've only seen the video.
Well, he's anti-lockdown. But the video itself is on YouTube.
Okay, then I'm sure we can play it. Let me pull it up over here.
If you're just joining us, Laurence Fox is an actor. He's funny. He's hilarious. And he has created a party.
This?
No.
Well, that's just what it says here.
It's a tweet.
Okay, but do you want this up?
Go back. If this is the YouTube one, this is the whole video. Yeah, that's the whole video. We want just the clip.
Okay. So, but you can watch the whole thing, right? They can watch the whole thing. Mm-hmm. That's kind of cool. Are we going to watch it?
It's 23 minutes.
Not now. I mean, later. I would like to watch it. Sounds fun.
There's so much to watch in this world.
There is so much to watch. You guys send us so much. I do not get to it all. I'm going to be
How
honest.
can you create decent policy without a full debate? Exclusive on it's on American Thought Leaders with the Epoch Times. So check out his whole interview with the Epoch Times on YouTube and go ahead and play this clip. Yeah.
How can you create decent policy without a full debate? So there is definitely an argument to say, are lockdowns effective in any way? Because if you look at around the world, from Sweden to Peru, interestingly, who have very severe lockdown measures. In the UK, we're still under extremely heavy lockdown measures, and yet we've had very, very high number of deaths per capita. And so I think there's a debate to be had about whether lockdown is a decent approach. It's not to say that my personal opinion will get in the way of that, because my personal opinion is an instinctive one and a moral one, which is that lockdowns are incorrect and wrong, even for a virus as deadly as Ebola. I think you have to allow people the freedom to look out. If you're seeing bodies pile up on the street, then you're going to not leave your house. And then in the same way, it's exactly the same with our cultural heritage. If someone says, this man was a slave trader, we're going to remove his statue and throw it away, how do children learn? How do we broaden the debate? Why not say, yes, this man or this woman or this person did do something wrong in our current view of the world, but wouldn't it be better to teach your children what happened? And also to be intellectually consistent with that. So I think ultimately, without the freedom to debate and the freedom to allow people to express themselves, it's through speaking that often we understand what we think. That all of these things are linked. Everything, just through that debate, inquiry, genuine intellectual curiosity, not stifling of it.
All right, go ahead and get the tweet that I just tweeted out. This is a new ad for his Reclaim party here.
Right, here we go. It's been a strange 12 months in which we've given up so many of our personal freedoms in the name of the common good. Now, look, whether you agree or disagree with how things have been handled, the one thing that we can agree on is that we find ourselves here, now, today, not tomorrow and not yesterday, thank God, today. So what are you going to do? Well, I am going to stand to be mayor of this beautiful city that stands at the heart of this warm, welcoming and tolerant nation. Why? Well, I want to reclaim your freedom. I want to reclaim your freedom to work when you want to work, where you want to work and how you want to work, and remove all the obstacles that stand between you and rebuilding after these lockdowns. And I want to reclaim your freedom to move, to be with whoever you want to be with and when you want to be with them. Your fundamental human need to be together, in sickness and in health, and to never take that freedom away again. Nobody should say their last goodbyes to anybody on an iPad ever again.
Wow.
And importantly, I want to reclaim your freedom to speak,
Wow.
to be yourself, to be part of the national conversation, to cherish your history rather than rewrite it, and to teach our children to be confident, not ashamed of who they are and where they come from. London is one of the most diverse cities on earth, millions of unique and individual voices, a celebration of collaboration, and it is only by working together that we will shape a better tomorrow. So, in the coming weeks, I will reveal a common sense plan to get London moving again and restore your freedoms. It's your life, your freedom. Reclaim it.
Oh my gosh,
That's so good.
I absolutely love it.
Dude, that was
absolutely love
awesome. Now,
it.
granted, here's the deal. He's an actor. Mm-hmm. So, but I would say that he did that really well. Really well. And I love, honestly.
Well, he obviously means it.
what the feelings that it evoked in me, frankly, were the same words that we hear from the left. Whoa.
Sorry.
That's all right. Nope, not that one. Nope. From the left about homosexuality, right? To live with who you want to live with, to be who you want to be with. You know, it evoked that same like emotional response that I'm hoping is going to allow him to cross the aisle, right?
Yeah.
To people to wake up going like, wait a minute. I've been let's say you're a part of the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
I've been fighting for my right to be with who I want to be with for the past, fill in the blank, however many years, let's say a decade. Okay?
Yeah.
And he's right.
Right.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
You can't on one hand say, I'm fighting for my right to be with, to love, to touch. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. Come here.
Who I want to be with, love, and touch. And yet, all of that goes away during a lockdown because in that sense, they can take it away from you at any time.
Right.
So I think he has a real shot here. I think that there are enough people that are not afraid, that are fed up, and it crosses party lines like we're going to hear from Lord Sumption here.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we still on YouTube? Shoot.
Yeah, I think so.
I think I'm allowed to say all that on YouTube.
Well, Lord Sumption his video is on YouTube. And then my question would be, can you play? I'm gonna take the gamble and say that if it's on YouTube, we should be able to play it. But it's so weird because we have videos that are taken down that other people's videos aren't taken down. Right. But so far, everything we've played is somebody else has on YouTube. Lord Sumption wants the epitome of the establishment. A brilliant barrister who represented the government in the Hutton inquiry, Supreme Court justice, supporter of the Remain campaign, an esteemed historian of the 100 Years' War. But then COVID happened. Over the past year, his unabashed criticism of lockdown policies has turned him into something of a renegade. It is a development that mystifies him. As he sees it, his views have always been mainstream liberal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play parts of his speech here.
Okay.
And then we're going to, without commentary, switch and stop YouTube. And for our commentary will be
that sounds good.
On the other.
All right, so y'all get ready to make your switch to the other 4 platforms that we are live at.
Facebook, Periscope,
and Twitch.
It is a development that mystifies him as he sees it. His views have always been mainstream liberal, and it is the world around him that has changed. From Unheard, they say, in the course of our conversation, the retired judge doesn't hold back. He asserts that it is becoming morally unacceptable to ignore COVID regulations and even warns that a campaign of civil disobedience has already begun. All right, go ahead.
Okay.
Press play.
Wait,
He's got my vote.
Which one is it?
It's in the U for Unheard.
Okay.
Laurence Fox's father was a very good actor, says Stuart the Brit.
Oh, for crying out loud. There we go.
His hair, though.
His hair.
Is that?
I love it.
It looks like he just woke up.
Let's put this
the
on.
most
This is cracking me up.
the most public-spirited thing that you can
I
do
know.
with despotic laws like these is to ignore them. I think that if the government persists long enough with locking people down, depending on the severity of the lockdown, civil disobedience is likely to be the result.
Hello and welcome to Lockdown TV by Unheard. I am here with Lord Sumption, one of our most senior jurists, senior judges here in the UK, recently retired from the Supreme Court, who has for the past year been one of the most outspoken and visible opponents of lockdowns as a policy. Welcome, Lord Sumption.
I'm glad to be here.
Let's just start with the kind of key basic question. What about these mandatory stay-at-home orders and lockdowns did you find unacceptable, so much so that you felt you had to speak out about it?
Well, I regard myself as a liberal with a small l. Until the COVID outbreak, that was a very middle-of-the-road position to be in. Since the outbreak, it's become controversial and even in some people's minds, extreme. This is, I think, some indication of how far our national psychology has moved. I do not believe that liberty is an absolute value. I think that there are circumstances where it's necessary to override it, but one has to be very careful to reserve that for extreme cases. And I do not regard COVID-19 as an extreme case. Yes, the pandemic is serious. Yes, it causes additional deaths, but I cannot regard a disease from which at least 99% of people recover and survive as sufficiently serious for that. I cannot regard a crisis which has resulted in a small increase in the risk as sufficient to justify locking people up in their homes. And when I say small, I think a good way of getting this into proportion is to look at the way that, for instance, Sir David Spiegelhalter, a world-renowned authority on the statistical assessment of risk, has looked at it. In the first 16 weeks of the pandemic in the UK, he reckoned the additional risk of death from COVID-19 was equivalent to an extra 55 days of perfectly normal risks of dying of just about anything. That's over the population as a whole. If you were a child, it was equivalent to 2 extra days of normal risk. Another way of looking at it is to ask, what's the average age at which people die with COVID-19? Well, it's about 82 and a half. What's the average age at which people die of anything? It's very slightly less. So we are not looking at something which involves risk of an order of magnitude greater than that which we face in everyday life.
It's not lowering
the risk of
age
pandemic
of death.
diseases is an inherent part of human existence and has been from the beginning of time.
I guess there's two sort of potential objections to that people would come up with. The first is that the risk would amplify and be magnified if it were allowed to kind of run riot without being checked by these kind of government interventions. That's the theory, and that's what various models tend to show, that if you allowed it unchecked, it could reach a stage where hospitals would be under threat, where overall medical provision was reduced, and where it suddenly became a much graver risk. What do you say to that argument?
Well, some of the statistics which I have cited, and one could choose others, are in fact equally relevant, whether there is a lockdown or not. For instance, Sir David Spiegelhalter's 16 weeks covered a period when the lockdown had been lifted, as well as the initial period when it was in place. But I think that the basic answer to this is that you have to decide, and it's essentially a value judgment, what is the degree of risk that you are prepared to accept. There are people who say that no risks should be accepted, that no additional deaths from a disease like COVID-19, which can be prevented, should be allowed. The only criteria, therefore, is there some measure that we can take to avoid or reduce these risks. The problem about that is that it attaches no value to all the various other aspects in which the countermeasures undermine our national life. It attaches no value to the economic destruction. It attaches no value to the very severe educational damage. It attaches no value to the fact that interaction with other human beings is not just an optional extra. It's not just a sort of leisure choice. It is a basic human need.
Yes.
And I think you have to accept that there is more to life than the avoidance of death. Now, ultimately, I don't think you can reduce this to a mathematical statement. It is a value judgment. But I think that the wrong value judgment was made. And I think it's quite interesting that nobody ever contemplated the possibility of a lockdown of healthy people, as opposed to people who are infected or ill, until the end of March in the UK, and very slightly earlier in other European countries. This is an event for which governments have been planning for a very long time. The National Risk Register assessed the possibility of a new pathogen causing a pandemic of respiratory disease as being liable to lead to anything up to 750,000 deaths. So that's much more than anything that we would have had, whether we'd had a lockdown or not. The planning assumed that the great object of public policy was that life should be as normal as possible, that you should isolate the sick and the vulnerable, not the healthy, and that you should avoid coercion, the latter being, I think, particularly important. When one looks through the SAGE minutes for the first 2 months before, in other words, the lockdown was ordered in the UK, you find them giving advice along exactly those lines. And we know that what changed the position was the fact that Italy had followed the Chinese example in ordering a national lockdown at the end of February of last year. Now, ultimately, this all stems from China, and Professor Ferguson has accepted in a very candid interview in the Times a couple of weeks ago that they never realized, as he put it, that they could get away with it until China, followed by Italy, showed them the way. Now, I think that's a serious problem about that. China was able to do that because it doesn't have a culture of liberty. It is a totalitarian state. It is a state which is founded upon the principle that human beings are simply tools of collective national policy.
For the hive mind.
That's completely different from our tradition. And I think most objective people would recognize that. What they tend to say is, well, this is a very serious pandemic. I've given my own views about how serious it really is. We have to temporarily depart from our normal principles. And that's fine, because we can go back to being less like China and more like the United Kingdom when it's all over. Now, I think that this is an illusion, because our status as a free society doesn't actually depend upon our laws or our constitution. It depends on convention. It depends on a collective instinct as to the right way to behave. There are many things that governments can do, which it is generally accepted they should not do. And one of them, until last March, was to lock up healthy people in their homes.
So do you think we have taken an irreversible step towards being more Chinese, more dirigiste in our...
I very much fear that we have, because the problem is when you depend for your basic freedoms on convention rather than law, once the convention is broken, the spell is broken. Once you get to a position where it is unthinkable to lock people up nationally, except when somebody thinks it's a good idea, then frankly, there is no longer a barrier at all. We have crossed that threshold, and governments do not forget these things.
So you would worry that, for example, if there's another pandemic, or if there's another new variant, or there's some other pathogen identified somewhere, now the precedent is set, what we do is we shut down society?
Yes. What I'm concerned about is not simply the danger of another new pathogen causing additional deaths. I think that this is a model which will come to be accepted, if we're not very careful, as a way of dealing with all manner of collective problems. Under existing statutes, the government has power to do just about anything. The Civil Contingencies Act says that it can do anything that an Act of Parliament can do, i.e. anything at all, subject in the case of that Act to getting parliamentary consent within not more than 7 days afterwards. Now, parliamentary consent is not quite a foregone conclusion, but it almost is. So the government has immense powers. The only thing that protects us from a despotic use of those powers is a convention that we have decided to discard. It's much more difficult to create conventions than to break them. These things emerge from decades, if not centuries, of habits of thought, but they are fragile. They are cultural constructs which can disappear almost overnight.
So what's interesting hearing you talk is that actually your objection is not strictly a legal one, which I suppose is why your sort of vocalness on the topic has been controversial, because you said that if you had judged the risk differently, you might have supported this policy if you'd thought that. So in fact, there's a bit of your judgment of science there mixed in with your sense of politics and weighing up of the risk against freedom and so on.
Yes, precisely. I don't think, unless you believe that liberty has an absolute value that trumps absolutely everything, you have to make an assessment of how serious the risk is. You can't simply say, well, I'm perfectly prepared to resign my freedoms and everything that is fundamental and that makes life worth living into the hands of scientists. You have to form a view.
So the million-dollar question is, why did you form that view and so few other people? Where are your colleagues, either former Supreme Court justices, senior lawyers, or politicians? Where have the establishment voices been opposing this direction of travel?
Well, senior judges are, by duty, silent on the subject until it comes before them in the form of a legal challenge. And the points that I have been making are essentially not legal, but as you quite correctly say, that they are political and constitutional in a much broader sense of the word. The big differentiator, of course, is the empire of fear. I made this point in the first of my Wreath lectures in 2019, that if people are sufficiently frightened, their craving for security will make them submit to almost anything. This is what I have called the Hobbesian bargain. Hobbes believed in the absolute state. It didn't have to be a monarchy, but it had to be absolute. He said that there was nothing short of the state actually killing people that the state should not be entitled to do. So he was not, let us say, a believer in liberty. This is because of his experience of the anarchy which flowed from the Civil War in England. And Hobbes believed that we resign our freedoms unconditionally and permanently into the hands of the state in return for security. Now, this is a model which, ever since the rise of a recognizable form of modern liberalism in the middle of the 19th century, has been almost universally rejected. But we have tended to revert to it during the current crisis. And I think that that is a very striking and very sinister development. People who are frightened will...
It's almost an hour interview. You guys can see that. Lord Sumption, mass civil disobedience has begun on Unheard. We are going to stop here on YouTube. Stay with us everywhere else, and we're going to get into some discussion about this.
Some commentary. All right, so you can go to resistancechicks.com, or if you're on YouTube, go down to the link in the description. Takes you right to where we're at right now, and we're live embedded on Facebook, DLive, Twitch, and Periscope. So YouTube, we love you. I probably should read some of the comments before we sign off there. Sumption is a member of the MHC. I don't know what that is, Streaky Bacon. All right, so we're going to sign off there. And but everyone else, stick where you are. We're not going anywhere else.
Down one. You did hit
that was
mass
it.
3.
Oh, okay. Wait.